Ways of thinking, being and doing for the new you. Pioneering thinkers from countries right around the world. Hello, Om Shanti, and a very warm welcome to today's masterclass, one of 21 masterclasses in New Consciousness, a whole series looking at new ways of thinking, being and doing for today's rapidly changing world. My name is Philippa, and throughout this series, together we are listening to the experiences of pioneering thinkers, people from all backgrounds, all walks of life, and literally from right around the world, as they share with us their way of developing resilience for these changing times. Now, during this time of coronavirus, many people have had an opportunity to spend much more time at home, whether they're doing a job that they can continue doing from home, or whether they've been furloughed, in other words, they've been paid to stay at home and not work. It's given all of us a chance to reflect on this home-work balance. And some of the jobs that we do demand that we work pretty hard, long hours, working through our lunch breaks, meetings after work, trying to do whatever it takes to prove to our bosses that we are putting in 100% effort, means that we can often feel completely exhausted when it comes to spending time at home. So how is this change in our work life affecting us? Now, everyone's experience has been completely different. For some, it will have been a positive experience. For others, it will have been a very challenging experience. Suddenly having all this time on their hands, not having the focus of the work that they were doing, has brought up many issues. And we're going to be exploring those issues in today's masterclass as we speak to someone who has consciously chosen to change her home-work balance. Now, this might be something that more of us are having to consider in the future when you think that the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, has suggested that people contemplate moving towards a 4-day week. So this is a whole territory that we're needing to now engage with as we look at how work affects our health and our well-being. Now, each of our speakers throughout this series is a teacher and a student of the Brahma Kumaris World Spiritual University. It's an international organization. It teaches Raja Yoga meditation, which is the yoga that deals with the mind, the thoughts. It's a way of understanding the self and really experiencing the self at a deep level. The organization was founded in India in 1936 through a series of visions and teachings that came through the original founder. His name was Brahma Baba. And these teachings were very much geared towards helping humanity through what was thought to be a very difficult period that was coming up. And for many people, they feel that that time is now, this transitional phase that we seem to all be experiencing as we go from one way of being to another. So the teachings feel incredibly relevant. The organisation works at all levels of society, right from organising big international conferences and seminars and symposiums, down to working at grassroots levels with community-based projects and people perhaps from the poorest sections of our communities, helping support them, empower them to make changes in their lives. One of the other interesting things about the Brahma Kumaris is that the founder decided quite early on that it was important to keep women at the front, that they had the qualities that were needed. And so the organisation has always been led by women, making it now the largest organisation of its kind to be led by women, spiritual organisation to be led by women in the world. Now, our speaker today is Dr. Loes Bemmel, who was born in Holland, but she was raised and educated in the former Dutch colony of Suriname, where her parents were originally from. Now, Suriname, in case you're not sure, is in the northeast of South America, with the Atlantic coast to the north and French Guiana to the east and Guyana to the west, with Brazil just underneath it to the south. And Loes chose to go into medicine, studying medicine and specialising in paediatrics. And she did a job that she loved doing, and she did really well for many, many years. But at the age of 56, she decided to give up her job and take early retirement. Her reason being that she felt the quality of her life was being compromised too much by her all-consuming job. Now, for the past 26 years, Loes has also been a student and teacher of the Brahmakumaris in Paramaribo in Suriname. So, Loes, welcome to Masterclasses. It's great to have you on from South America. Now, this job that you were doing, you had an experience which I think many people have had, where somebody leaves and their job isn't replaced, and so those who are left behind have to fill in behind them, and you found yourself one of only two, whereas previously you had been one of three. And you continued for a while, and then you decided to go part-time, which you did for a couple of years, and then you took the decision to stop working altogether. Was that a gradual thing that came upon you to decide to stop working, or was it one day you just suddenly thought, that's it, I'm not doing this anymore? How did that happen for you?
Good to be here. I think it was a gradual thing to stop working, because when I started making choices for a more spiritual lifestyle, I realized that some things, it's not easy, were not easy to combine. For instance, I cannot work the whole night going up and down for emergencies and then have my early morning meditation in a good quality, and then have my morning studies for the same good quality. And so I realized quite early that working 100% and living a spiritual lifestyle as I would like to was not possible to make that combination. So I started to work 80% first. And then from the 80%, I gradually in a couple of years, tuned down to 60%. And that 60% was a very interesting 60% because it was we had a very good relationship, the three colleagues that we were working together with. And so I was fulfilling all my responsibilities in the job, in the sense that I was on call as everyone was on call. I was present as everyone was present. I would do my rounds as everyone was present, but I cut down on my private clinics. And so in that way, it was possible to go up to the 60%. And in that 60% was also taking leave when I wanted to take leave, but then in a good relationship with my colleagues. So, and we were really, I must say, I couldn't have it better, because I was the one who was making the rosters. And so I was able to fit in everyone in their own timings, so we could have a good relationship and working together as we wanted. And then from that 60%, I was also able to travel and do the things that I would like to do, for my spiritual support, but also to give support in the surrounding countries wherever it was needed. And then it was a sudden change that one of my colleagues decided to resign, from his job in the hospital. And that was quite a surprise, must say. It was not long before he resigned that we knew about it. And then, this was two of us left from three. And you know what happens when it's three and then you have to share it within the two, and you are now the youngest one. Then things started shifting. And as they started shifting, it showed me and it taught me that my priority was not in running around in the hospital anymore. My priority was to give quality time first to myself, and then, to be able to serve on a physical level as well. And so when I start seeing that it was getting compromised, then I had to think of what was important to me in my life, and it was a conscious choice that this was not that I wanted, and I still wanted to do the spiritual service in the country and outside the country and be available for that as well. And so, yes, I had, the very strong thought that only when I take a decision, which was not easy, must say, because I loved the job, I loved the people I was working with. The people also loved me where I was working with, and we had very good relationships all over the place. But then I decided that within a year, I will not do it as I was doing it by that time, because it was not the priority in my life. I couldn't fulfill that. And so I decided to take early retirement, and then from there to do like not stop immediately, and but still be available and do when colleagues would be on leave, I fill up for them. So that is what I did for more 1 year and a half almost.
I wonder what that first morning was like when you were officially no longer in your role as a doctor, and waking up and realizing the extent to which possibly you had become dependent upon the status that you had from doing the job, from the satisfaction of being able to make a difference to people's lives, from having that daily routine to suddenly having so much time in front of you. How did you find that?
It was challenging. It was very strange, because, I've always been working. I started working as, young in my internships. I started working. I've always been working. And I loved it. It was not that I didn't wake up and I say, oh, I don't want to go like this. No, it was never like this. I always loved it to go to work. And then it was very challenging. It was very interesting because there was not, it was not that I didn't have anything to do, because I had enough to do, because, whatever I was doing in the organization, whatever I was doing for my own self-progress, whatever I was doing, it was taking a lot of my time too. And in a daily routine that I've been, grown up for the last years, it was not difficult to stay in that daily routine, like waking up early in the morning, have to do the spiritual studies in the first hours of the morning. But then, then is that space, what to do next. So it started to shift, and it was this very strange, I don't know how to call it, but I started to realize, because I did it purposely to stop working, and so I wanted to live that process. I wanted to live it. I didn't want it to just pass by. And so I was very attentive on what was happening inside the self. What was I feeling? What was I thinking? How did I feel that I didn't go to that place where I was used to go every day, many times a day? And physically, it's also a 5 minutes distance from the home. So it's not far away too. And so, it was not difficult in the beginning to do things differently, to use the time differently, to spend more time in the administration of the organizational things as well, because that was getting a little bit aback. But then what happened, which was to my own surprise, I couldn't sleep at night. And why? Because I was again and again waiting for the telephone to ring. That and then jumping up, that did I miss the call? And then I realized in a couple of days that I was so, it became such a habit to be called in the night just because they needed you. And the phone was not ringing because they didn't need me anymore. And so I put myself through that process, that when we are in jobs like this, we become dependent on them. Sometimes we think they are dependent on us, but we also become dependent on them. So the phone not ringing, people not calling you because they don't need you, was a very interesting discovery. That they only call you when they need you. They will not call you to ask how are you or anything, but they call you when you need you, and they don't need you anymore, so they don't call you anymore. So the phone was quite silent, And I went through that purposely. I went through that feeling. I went through that, experience of understanding what is going on when people don't work anymore. And I did it purposely, so I was actively doing it. And I started to understand what happened to people, when they are sent on leave or when they are sent on retirement. And it made me understand those people on a new level. And what I started to do from there when I went through this process, I started to connect with my colleagues, just to have them, I was feeling a deeper urge to share with them how important it is to not only work, but do things that are very important to you, that are, adding to the quality of your life, and not, because now I experienced what it meant, and it was not long, but I went through it purposely, and then I saw. So I started, because I saw that all these people that you were working with, they were colleagues, they were not friends. No, all the people or the patients, it was a business relationship. And so that business relationship stopped as you stopped your business, no? And so it helped me. And from that moment onwards, when I started to have this realization, I would call my colleague friends and talk with them, I just share with them. And especially also the younger ones, that how important it is to fill your life with the things that you prioritize. And if your job is your priority, you just go ahead. But otherwise, make sure that you don't wait until the last minute that you are discharged or you are sent with retirement.
I think there must be very few people who haven't had some kind of experience of what you're talking about, whether they've just been in between jobs or whether they've been let go from a job, that you suddenly experience the equivalent of the phone not ringing, and that you are no longer the role that you're playing in your workplace. And for many people at the moment, their jobs aren't there anymore for them to do because companies are closing down so many jobs, and people may well be feeling that sense of emptiness, and the sense of possible rejection because they were chosen to be let go rather than someone else. And yet here you were, having consciously chosen this, and yet still your self-esteem and your sense of self and your self-value took a bit of a knock at that point. And yet you had your spiritual life and your spiritual practice, which was there to rise up and support you and meet you. What advice would you give to someone who's recently found that they are no longer doing the job that they were doing, and that they're on the edge of plummeting into that sense of losing themselves, losing their role and value? How would you guide them and support them in finding new ways to replace that same feeling that they got from their job?
Well, there's one thing which I was doing, gradually. It was not new to me, to disconnect with the role, no? To disconnect with the role. But it's only when it happens, it's only when it's not there, then you realize, how much you identified with it or not. And I feel, especially for people who are on the end of delivering care, that it is very important to care for yourself and to pay attention that your whole sense of purpose is not only your job, unless you feel that is your life. Say it's like some people do feel that. I remember one colleague. He was so in tune with his job. He would be there 6 o'clock in the morning. He would be there, starting his rounds, being there the whole day fully. And then when he retired, he said, I have done my job, I'm going to retirement now, and I'm going to live, in a remote place and do my farming. It took him a couple of months and he left body, the soul left body. So his purpose was fulfilled. And it was a shock for many, but, I had spoken to him many times, and he said, I feel that this is what God has asked me, to help people on this level until I'm done, and then I'm going to take my retirement and go and do some farming. After a couple of months, he was gone. But because I had spoken to him, I knew that he really felt that he fulfilled his life's purpose. But many, and I can say maybe including me, we don't know what is our life purpose. We don't take time to look at it. And so we start identifying ourselves with different things which come along the way. And the more it's a job or, a function or a position where you have a certain, how to say, I don't want to use the word power, but it's like, you're on that, you're the one who are there to help others make decisions of their lives. It's very easy to identify yourself with it. It's very easy. And so, people in healthcare, they lose themselves and they forget what it is that they started off with. And so this is one of the messages that I try to give to healthcare workers, that, you can only be a good healthcare worker when you're a good person. And so spend enough time, for yourself, with yourself. Spend enough time to work on your self-respect, and not make it dependent on what people think of you, what people believe of you, but make sure that you believe it yourself. And it's a very nice way to approach healthcare workers. I've not been doing it on a grand scale, but as soon as there is an opportunity to help, this will be the topic that I take up with them, that how much time do you spend for yourself? Because if you don't have that resource, where will you have your own resource? And then connect them with a higher source, depending on their belief system, their spiritual practices. Connect them to help them to make sure that that there is a higher source. And you can draw from that source, but you have to connect.
I'm just thinking...
Connect with the self and connect with the higher source, yes.
I'm just thinking about your life in terms of having had these two very parallel paths, one being your medical training and then your role as a medical professional, looking at people as physical bodies and their physical ailments and the brain functioning and all of those things, and the other being your spiritual study and practice, which is seeing each individual as a spiritual being. Has there ever been a conflict between those two, and how have you somehow managed to knit those two things together within yourself?
Well, I must say there had been many cases where I had to decide what is best, how to approach it. And it's difficult when you're on a spiritual path. It is difficult to split it up, because it's mixing up, it's like both the things are there. And I had been in situations where, because of the spiritual path, it was easier to deal with the physical. Many times even, because then you can see the broader picture. And you can also see that your role is distinct from, just the physical. And I remember vividly, cases where was not easy for people to deal with. But because of this, understanding of a couple of things, I could step into it and just be there and contribute whatever I felt that I could contribute spiritually. And what happened, and that is the beautiful thing, others also tap into that energy. You see, and I can give, this is a nice example. I love this boy. This boy he came from the interior, because the hospital I was serving with, was serving people who come from the interior. So they will be flown in by helicopter or by small flight after many hours of traveling, and also many hours, many days of progressing of the disease. And so this boy came in, and he was maybe 1 year and a half or something, and he was seriously ill. And he came in just before the weekend. And I was not in charge. That was my weekend off. And another colleague was there, taking, she was there. And then she called me in the weekend and she said, I don't know what to do with this nursing staff. They gave up on the child because the child was really in serious condition. They gave up on the child, and she was not the one who was working in our hospital. So she was just doing she was just in charge for that weekend. And when she called me, she said, I don't know what to do. This child is going, and the nursing staff is also letting the child go, and I don't want this to happen. And she was very angry. So this was a Sunday, Sunday midday. And I listened to her, and she was very angry, and she was like frustrated. So I said, you know what? I'll make my time and I come and see what I can do. So I prepared myself, because that was one thing that I was always doing. I prepared myself. I took some minutes off, just sit in meditation, and then I went. And this boy was really in a deteriorating condition. It was really, whatnot. And I was looking at the nurses, and they were all frustrated because they couldn't do anything. It was beyond their level of whatever they could do. And I stood there and I looked at that boy, and I connected with the soul, I connected with the soul. And I was feeling this life energy, bubbling, that this child was there, and this child wanted to stay alive. I couldn't do much medical, but what I did, I started to meet, and I met the nursing staff at that moment. And I asked them if they can just shift their mindset a little bit. And I did my inner work, inner work, in the sense that I know I couldn't jump in it medically, but spiritually it was a nice challenge. And so that evening, I went back again. And I just asked, I said, nurse, you have some time for me? Let's sit. So I sat with some of them. And I sat with some of them, not all of them, some of them which I knew that, they would be ready to help. And I asked them, any one of you would like to adopt this boy? Just adopt him as a foster mother, So this was he said, what we can do? We will just pour a lot of love and a lot of care and a lot of compassion. This is the only thing we will do, and whatever we can do medically, we will do. So there we go now. And then what happened was very beautiful, because one said, yes, I will. The next one said, I will join you. And so what happened, they shifted their attitude. And the medical condition was still very poor. But because they shifted their attitude, the whole atmosphere just started changing. And so now the next morning, the next group of nurses will come. And now they start fighting. This is my boy. This is my boy. This is my boy. His name was Jacob. He said, this is my boy. I will take care of him. Yes, we are going to take care of him. What happened was a magical wonder, that in 2 days' time, 3 days' time, this child start looking around, looking for contact with the nurses, with those who were taking care of him. And he survived, But this was not, I felt it was not a medical thing that was happening. It was more the combination of those things. And so he survived. And he was not, he was a very bright boy. But he had physically, he didn't, he had, he's limping and whatever. But then he went after a couple of months, he left back to the interior, and then he came back after a couple of months. Oh my goodness, this was a big party. Because this boy now was everyone's child, he was everyone's child. And so this case only, it showed me that once you're there, whatever you can contribute spiritually, others will also come and join. And it was not a medical thing. I know for sure. It was not only, of course, he had medicine and whatever, but it was the level of care, it was the attention, it was, everything, the attitude that changed around the child. And even, after, if he would come and I was not there, they would call me and say, who's here? Come and see him, like this, So this is where I see that, although things can be very challenging, but it can also contribute, and make it a beautiful, beautiful experience for many.
It's incredible to hear a medical doctor talking in this way in terms of understanding the energy of the situation and the power of people's thoughts and intentions of those who are directly caring for him. And I'm sure many in the caring profession in dealing with coronavirus cases will have been through similar experiences. But I wonder what notices you've changed in yourself, because it's been quite a few years now since you stopped working as a professional and doing your spiritual work. What changes you've noticed in yourself in terms of the time that you've now got to feel really connected and to operate from a different level of being, and how that has affected your sense of well-being? How has that now landed in you in this moment?
I must say it's still a journey, because I more and more realize that it is very easy to keep on doing things the way you've always done them. And, the way that you have been operating, because, of course, you've, like when you start the medical study, I was 17. And, I started medical study when I was 17. And so you grow, in that discipline, you grow, and you develop a certain way of thinking, a certain way of approaching things, and also approaching your own life. When the same time that I started my pediatrics practice, that was the time I also started my spiritual studies. And so those two things were like side by side. And then, develop the deeper sense that health is not just the absence of disease. It's so much more, and well-being is even higher than that. That if I can find my sense of purpose in life, because this is a big thing that I realized, that my sense of purpose is not the job I'm doing. Might be in some cases, but many times it's not the same thing. I roll into a certain discipline. I do what was in front of me, but is it the thing that I really, is that really the thing that I have to do? Because it's easy to be trained. It's easy to get, whatever, we can get skills, we can get, especially now, so many technical skills are there. But does it take me away from my inner being and acting on the outer side and for the outer world? Or is it one thing that I can do it from inside out and then, be there for myself, for society, for others, whatever. And I think that is one thing that not many of us think about. What is driving me to go in a certain discipline or job or financial situation? Many people don't think of it. They see it and they just do what everyone is doing. And then, we come in life and we come across many things. And do I still feel that what I'm doing is fulfilling my sense of purpose?
For many people, being a pediatrician and making such a huge difference to people's lives would already be a massive sense of purpose for their life. And clearly for you, there was something else that was calling you that in your mind felt more important. Share with us a little more, if you can, what it is about this spiritual journey that you're on, which felt so important to you, that you fully honoured that and that you fully developed within that frame, having done the career path, that you wanted to switch and now really focus on your spiritual path and your spiritual life. What is it about that life that for you is so important?
I think it's, the deeper connection with the self and the connection with the Supreme, and looking at things on a much wider scale and broader level. Something comes in mind when I was, just before I started to study pediatrics, I was in public health, and there was one training, someone who came and he asked me, he said, "Why don't you join public health? Why do you go and look at dirty, snuffy noses only?" He asked me that when I was, I don't know what age, when I wanted to do something, like I felt I had to go pediatrics. But when he asked me that question, it stayed with me. It means it had some impact on me. When he asked me that question, why are you running behind snuffy nose and you can look at the whole picture going to public health? It's the same thing, but on the next level. I understand quite deeply that if we're spiritually not healthy, we will never be healthy physically. It's a quite deep thing that I started to understand, the mind-body relationship. To me, it made a lot of sense, and still, even more, because these things are so intricate. They are so connected, so intimately connected. You cannot define them, but many people, in my opinion, don't realize that. Many people, in my opinion, see it as two totally different entities. For me, it's one thing. And so I thought, that having that medical background, having so much, seen so much on a medical, physical basis, and then also understanding that to connect medicine or physical with the spiritual, there are not many people who think like that. And so when I took the decision, people were thinking, what happened to her? How can such a well-established specialist stop working? But then I said, what I feel in my life at this moment in time is that I have to be strong on the spiritual level so that I can also serve those who are not there in the medical field, especially medical field, the health sector. And it's a very subtle thing. It's not a very, because having taken that decision, there's two things. People think you're getting crazy. And there are also people who say this is a very brave decision to take, because how many people, will do this and take a decision because they understand that there is more to life than just being a doctor.
In a way, what you're talking about is a kind of an illness or a disease or a lack of integration at a soul level, which no amount of medication is going to touch. And it's wanting peace. It's wanting the experience of peaceful mind. It's wanting to find an experience of happiness. And this whole notion of well-being that we're talking about is not something that you can medicate for. It's something that has to come from inside. And they say that happiness is the best medicine. And yet these experiences in today's society are actually quite hard to find, aren't they? Peace and happiness. Not everyone has that at the moment. And so what you're doing in a way is approaching the problems, but from a completely different standpoint, from looking at it from the level of the soul qualities. rather than looking at it from the level of the physical status and well-being of the person. And this is now what you're trying to help people with, because clearly you're still wanting to help people, but just in a very different way. And it's beautiful to see that this is now how your life has turned out. And do you feel pleased with the decision that you made? Do you feel it was the right one?
Yes. There will be moments, and especially when I'm back in the hospital, or when I meet my old friends, or, connect with them. The first question they will ask me always, and they tease me. When they see me in the hospital, they ask me, "Oh, you're back?" That will be for every time I go. There will at least be one person who will ask me the question. Sometimes, you go one day and 6 will ask you the same question. And they look at you and they smile and they come and they hug because, they're happy they see you back. And so those questions really make you think about it again, Many people ask me, "Don't you miss your job?" I don't miss the job. One thing, if I look at it, I was a couple of months back, someone came with a newborn child and put it in my arms. And then I realized, that those moments are the moments that I miss, but I never missed them before. It's only when it happened that I realized I haven't done this for so many years. Because connecting with the smallest one was, one of my favorite things, in the sense that they can't speak, they can't explain. So you have to feel them. You have to, sense what is going on and what that soul, what that child needs. And then help others also to feel those needs and to see what is the best to do. And so that moment was a moment where I realized that connection with the smallest one was not there anymore, which was really, they helped me so much to grow spiritually. So that sense of gratitude, for them being in my life was so big that morning that I realized that it was those small ones, who don't have that body language, in the sense that they are not there yet. That is the ones where you connect with on a spiritual level quite deeply, because you have to share that peace with them. You have to share, that sense of calm with them. You have to share that love with them on a level that is different from older ones. And they were quite, I see they were part of the laboratory of spiritual experiments, where I was in for all these years. And so, the sense that deeper connection with the smallest ones was a very beautiful experience. And they have shown me so much. They have taught me so much. And I was also able to share that with the ones who were working with them. You see?
But now you've taken all that experience and you're sharing that with a much wider public, and so that it's a loss for the babies that don't have you looking after them, but it's the gain of so many people that you're now in touch with and working with and supporting in making the changes to their life that they want to make. And your example is a shining one of putting your own inner qualities and spiritual practice ahead of your professional career. It would be lovely if you could just lead us into a meditation and share with us your experience of some of these qualities that you've been talking about, so that we can really have a chance to experience that for ourselves. So if you could do that for us, Loes, that would be really lovely.
I take a moment to be with myself first. And focus my attention to that pure, pristine part in the self. That core of my being, filled with love and peace. And from that core, the sense of giving, of caring, from what I have, I can always share. And so I look at myself as a spiritual being, a child of the Supreme, and feeling the Divine Presence close, filling the soul, filling the self with those beautiful qualities. Still, silent, present. From this deeper sense, I can see my purpose of giving and sharing and caring. Wherever I am, do it. Flowing over, adding to the atmosphere just by my own vibrations. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you so much, Loes. That was really lovely.
Thank you.
And it's been very inspiring to hear your story of this path that you're now on. And I really hope that for people who are experiencing changes in their home work life and finding that balance is shifting, that there's been some real inspiration from what you've shared, that coming from your own inner being, you can find the support that you need to really flourish despite your work situation and how much you're spending at work and how much you're being at home. So thank you so much, Loes, for being with us from Suriname, and all the best as you continue on your journey from here. Thank you.
Om Shanti. Thank you.
And thank you to you as well for joining us from wherever you are. I wish you all the best with your onward journey in this whole area of health and well-being. Until the next time, take good care, keep safe. Om Shanti, and goodbye. "21 Masterclasses in New Consciousness, New Ways of Thinking, Being and Doing for the New You." Pioneering thinkers from countries right around the world.
awakening to a new way of living.